Hey guys, it's Samus Geek from thegamefanatics.com, and today I'm going to talk to you about the current status of Android. Now, I am an Android user. I have been for almost a year and a half now, and I love the OS. I mean, I use it daily, and currently, since I don't own my own computer right now, I'm actually using it as my primary internet surfing device. And I have to say, Android definitely is an incredible operating system, but it's still falling behind. Despite its lead in the market share, selling 2 to 1 to iOS, 2 to 1 to BlackBerry, and I don't even know how much more it sells than Windows Phone 7. It is a gigantic OS. And it should be doing a lot better than it is. But the fact is that the things that make Android great kind of hold it back. One of the main problems is its openness. Now, I appreciate Google for taking its step towards Linux and trying to create an open environment, but Google should be a lot more involved in Android than it actually is. For example, huge name apps that force close all the time need Google to come in and help, because honestly, it's going to look bad to a grandma who's planning on buying her new smartphone that Facebook crashes twice as much on Android than it does on iOS. And the fact is that even though Google does compete with some of these people, they need to take steps in their operating system. They need to put some kind of restrictions, if not restrictions on hardware manufacturers as well. Because it really sucks that Samsung Galaxy users cannot switch their search engine. They are stuck with Bing because Samsung made a deal with Microsoft. And that's one thing that's weird about Android. It's completely open, but not to the user. It's open to the hardware manufacturer. It's open to the software designer, but it's not open to the user. And that's a major problem. And Google should really step in and try to make it as open as possible and also help out a lot of these companies. For example, Netflix on Android is an absolute joke. It's an absolute joke. And it's really sad that the only two Motorola phones that Netflix can run on are the original Droid and the original Droid X. The Droid X2 has come out. Guess what? It can't run Netflix. My Droid 2 is here, and it can't run Netflix. My Droid 2's successor, the Droid 2 Global, which is way more powerful than the Droid 2. Guess what? Can't run Netflix. Why? Because Netflix is specifically designed to about 10 phones. And it's insane. It's insane. Every iPhone can play Netflix. Every Windows Phone 7 phone can play Netflix. Every iPad can play Netflix. But not every Android phone. Things like this is where Google needs to step in and help these software designers to take their apps to as many phones as possible. Maybe make something even smaller if the phone can't handle it. Maybe an SD stream on only your Instant Queue, or something like a Netflix Mini, something that can run on every phone. And if it can run on the Droid 1, it can definitely run on the Droid 2. If it can run on the Droid X, it can definitely run on the Droid X2. There's really weird licensing issues. And the fact is that Google needs to step in. They need to take their software restrictions and be a little more harsh on it. Make these developers develop for the entire Android platform. It's ridiculous that there is a Bing for Verizon Wireless, but the other Bing works on all the other networks. But Bing itself needs a specific Verizon Wireless app. Not only that, but China needs its own Bing app. They can't use the same Bing app as Americans do. And it's just awkward. The entire situation is awkward, and it makes it complicated to the user. You see, the average mom or pop is going to look at the Android marketplace, and they're honestly confused. I mean, seriously, on the Android marketplace right now, there are fake apps that don't really do anything. I remember one time I looked up Angry Birds before it was available because I had no idea because I was new to Android, and there was literally an Angry Birds app made by Pablo33568. I still have the picture on my Facebook that I took of this fake Angry Birds app. It's hilarious. There's also tons of different Angry Birds apps here that just clutter the entire system. The fact is that Google does need to be a little bit more restrictive on what gets into the App Store. I mean, I love the idea of a complete open App Store, but the fact is, you're selling this to a specific crowd. You are selling this to a market that doesn't understand the same things that I do. They don't understand different interfaces, which is another huge problem with Android. No interface is the same. Bing has a completely different interface from Facebook and different interface from Twitter, and Foursquare has a completely different interface. Every app has a different interface. Now, I'm not saying that they should force people to have one interface like iOS does, but a guideline or a basic infrastructure of interface to present some sort of uniformity, at least among the big apps, and help out big companies like Foursquare, big companies like Facebook, big companies like Twitter, and help guide them to create a just a uniform, universal, big standard Android interface for the system would completely help. And trust me, if all the big developers are having a similar interface, these small little guys are probably going to try to mimic that interface as well, which will make it a million times more user-friendly. I have no problem navigating the Android operating system, but the complaints I've heard from different iOS users and my mom who's trying to get into smartphones and her Droid 1, and she just can't navigate because all the apps work so differently. And that's the target you're hitting. And the problem is that now that iPhone is on Verizon Wireless, it has become an increasing threat to the Android platform. You may be 33% of the market now, but how long are you going to be able to hold that grasp? How long are you going to be able to outsell two Android devices? Despite the fact them being cheaper, that's the only real thing you have on iOS right now. And iOS is getting exclusive apps, early apps, because it's guaranteed money. And the fact is if the Android marketplace was easier to navigate, if the entire user interface of the platform was easier to navigate, it would just be a completely different experience. Now let's look at tablets. There has been no tablet that could touch the iPad. And I gotta say, it has to do with price. I don't know what it is about Android tablet developers, but the Honeycomb is fine. I've used Honeycomb, and it is a brilliantly done operating system. It's actually a lot easier to use than Honeycomb on the phone. But the major problem with Android tablets is that the marketing is crap. The marketing is crap, the price is too high, and you really can't sell me something that's not an iPad. I mean, it's ridiculous. I want to get an Android tablet, but I'm probably going to end up getting the iPad. Why? Because the iPad has more support and has just better apps and better organization, and everything about the iPad is better than the Android tablets, except for some minor hardware differences. And that really doesn't mean anything to me because if the hardware is not supported by brilliant software, what do you got? Now, there is some major advantages that Android does have. All the apps work universally with Android tablets. For example, iPad does not have a Facebook app. Android does have a Facebook app. Then that's a major advantage. But the fact is that people in the market for a tablet aren't the same people in the market for a phone. So Facebook may not be the biggest pressing issue here. You see, people are more interested in the portability of a tablet, the software support, and the price. Because 500 big ones is a lot to throw down. And the fact is that the Motorola Zoom 2 is probably going to be out next year and have, very little support for the Zoom 1, knowing Motorola's track history when it comes to their hardware. So, why should I stick with, Motorola or Samsung or Toshiba when Apple's a guaranteed sure thing that this thing will be supported until like 2 or 3 models, and even then it'll continuously be supported through iTunes. That's the major problem that Android has, is its lack of support. My Motorola Droid 2, right here, Motorola, is a big example of why hardware developers cannot have this much control over the Android platform. I'm stuck on Android 2.2.2. Even though my phone can perfectly run Honeycomb, unless I root it and install Honeycomb myself, I'm not going to get that update because Motorola is too lazy to ship out the update on this phone. So, Google, I love your free thinking attitude. I love your restriction free on software developers. But you have to enforce some type of restriction because these hardware developers are taking advantage of your consumers and it's hurting your platform that they develop for. You got to remember, you're the boss, Google. And right now, you are letting other companies control your territory. And that's what the problems I see right now with the Android OS. I'm glad you sat here and listened to this for 12 minutes. That must have been extremely boring. But if you have some feedback, please leave a comment either on YouTube or thegamefanatics.com. I'm really interested in seeing other people's opinions on this. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me because a lot of people love the openness that Google has taken with the platform. But personally, I think it's hurting it a bit. And if we want to see Android evolve and continue to be a challenge to iOS, they're going to have to step up their game. Samuel out.